After a disturbing 911 call, 3 family members murdered by the father who later shot himself were found in a locked house. But what made a devoted father turn on the people he loved? On 11th May 2025, a 911 call from a quiet street in Kalispell, Montana, launched officers into a nightmare. A man is on the line. His voice is oddly calm. No screams, no panic. But something feels wrong. The words he utters are deeply concerning. He speaks just long enough to raise the alarm. Then, dead air. And by the time police arrived, nothing was left to save. The house looks still from the outside. No movement, no noise. But when police breach the door, they step into a silent, frozen scene that will haunt them forever. In the living room, they find Nicholas Olsen Hartley and his 27-year-old wife, Katie. Both are dead from what appear to be gunshot wounds. But the horror doesn't end there. As officers move deeper into the home, their worst fears are confirmed. 2 young children, a toddler and an infant, are also found lifeless. Their small bodies bear no signs of a struggle. No cries for help had ever come from this house before. No red flags reported. And now, no one left to speak. But one thing becomes clear. This wasn't a random act of violence. Nothing had been taken. The doors were locked from the inside, and the only known weapon was still in the home. The father, who made concerning statements hours before in the 911 call, was the reason behind this tragedy. From the outside, the Olsen Hartleys looked like any young nuclear family chasing a normal life in quiet Montana. But behind that door, something much deeper and darker was brewing, and no one knew why Nicholas pulled the trigger on his beloved family.
On Sunday morning, officers responded to a mental health call in the Silver Brook Estates neighborhood. When they arrived, they found 4 people in the home shot dead, including 33-year-old Nicholas Olsen Hartley, his wife Katie, a 6-year-old child, and a 7-month-old baby.
Katie Olsen Hartley was just 27, a devoted wife, a stay-at-home mother. But to those who knew her, she was something else entirely. The heartbeat of the family. Katie was the best mom we have ever known, said her sister-in-law, Kayla. Her babies were her universe. Everything Katie did, every choice, every breath, was for her children. And they knew it. Heidi and Stellan didn't just receive love, they lived in it. 6-year-old Heidi was sharp, curious, and full of fire. She had the kind of energy that filled up a room and a laugh that echoed down hallways. Goofy, Kayla remembered, fiery and bursting at the seams with life. Heidi wanted to see everything, try everything, be everything. Then there was Stellan, the baby of the family, just 7 months old, calm, sweet, always smiling. He loved to dance, Kayla said, holding back tears. He was excited to start eating food. He was so happy just being with us. A baby boy named after a beloved family member, now gone before he could even take his first steps. Tucked into the heart of Flathead Valley, Kalispell, Montana is the kind of town where tragedy isn't supposed to happen. With fewer than 30,000 residents, it's a quiet place, surrounded by mountains, forests, and lakes. The kind of place people move to when they want to feel safe. Still. Close to Glacier National Park, and just an hour south of the Canadian border, Kalispell is a town built on family values, fresh air, and faith in neighbors. It's here, in this picture of small-town calm, that the Olsen Hartley family made their home. They blended in, smiled at grocery store clerks, played in the yard. Katie posted photos of the kids, like any proud mom. Nothing about them screamed trouble. And that's what makes it all the more haunting. Because inside that quiet house, behind walls no one could see through, A storm was building, one that would leave the entire town stunned, broken, and searching for answers that may never fully come. And as the investigation unfolded, one question kept returning. What could have turned that kind of light into darkness? In the hours that followed the discovery, investigators began piecing together what had happened and why it happened. According to law enforcement, the 911 call that triggered the response came from Nicholas Olsen Hartley himself. While the exact content of his message hasn't been released, officers say the tone was disturbing, enough to prompt an immediate dispatch. By the time they arrived at the family home, something about the scene pushed them to act fast. Officers forced entry, and inside, every room told the same story. No signs of a domestic argument, no defensive wounds, no movement. Just silence, and the devastating aftermath of what they would later confirm as a murder which turned into the perpetrator taking his own life. Nicholas, it appears, had turned the gun on his wife and children before making the call. Then, with no one left but himself, he ended his own life. Forensic psychologists examining the case have made one thing clear. While this was an isolated act, the patterns behind it are disturbingly familiar. A man in crisis, a family caught in the collapse, and a system that, yet again, never saw it coming until it was far too late. Mental health professionals suspect Nicholas was spiraling. The calmness of his call didn't reflect peace. It reflected panic, disconnection, despair. Police believe he may have been experiencing an acute mental health emergency at the time of the murders. But the question still hangs heavy over Kalispell. Why didn't anyone see it coming?
From a law enforcement perspective, we'll move forward and make sure that the family has the answers that they do need, anything that we can help them with as they move forward. And we also are putting things in place for our first responders and help them process this and work through the difficulties that come when we handle a crime scene of this nature.
What happened in Kalispell wasn't just a tragedy. It was a pattern repeating itself. As Kalispell recovered from this tragedy, a hauntingly similar case unfolded in Nebraska just one day earlier. Before the Olsen Hartley murders stunned Kalispell, another American family was annihilated, this time in rural Nebraska. On the morning of 10 May, deputies in Dawson County entered a home and discovered 4 people dead. The victims were identified as Bailey Koch, 41, and her 2 sons, Hudson, 18, and Asher, 16. The killer was her husband, Jeremy Koch, aged 42, who took his own life after stabbing his entire family to death. But this wasn't a man hiding his pain. In fact, Jeremy's downward spiral had been well documented, especially by Bailey, who had begged for help. Just days earlier, she had launched a GoFundMe, openly pleading for support. Her husband had battled depression since 2009 and had survived at least 4 previous attempts to end his life. His mental and physical condition had worsened dramatically in the weeks before the murders, so much so that in March, Bailey had woken up to find him standing over her with a knife, saying, "Something is wrong." And something was. Jeremy had become severely malnourished and dehydrated, unable to care for himself. Medical professionals cited a mental health crisis. Bailey pushed for electroconvulsive therapy, inpatient care, anything that might bring her husband back. But after years of effort, she admitted in a heartbreaking post, "Mental illness is taking my husband from me." On 8 May, Jeremy was released from inpatient treatment. By the morning of 10 May, Bailey, Hudson, and Asher were gone. The person who found their bodies was heartbreakingly Bailey's own father. In an open letter, He described what he saw as a memory that would haunt him forever, and called out the system that had let his daughter's family down. These two tragedies, one in Nebraska, one in Montana, happened within 24 hours of each other. In both cases, the men behind the murders were not hardened criminals or known abusers. They were fathers in crisis, men who, on paper, were receiving treatment. Men who had families trying desperately to save them. And yet, none of it was enough. These were not isolated flukes. They were the result of a mental health system that often stops just short of true intervention. A system where getting help sometimes means waiting weeks, fighting insurance, or being discharged the moment you no longer seem like a threat. The warning signs were all there, in both cases. But the safety nets? They weren't strong enough. Experts say these aren't random acts of violence. They're failures in a system that still doesn't know how to handle mental health emergencies until it's already too late. And in the town of Kalispell, the cost of that failure was 4 lives and a community left in shock. By the evening of May 11th, after hours of combing through the scene, interviewing neighbors, and gathering forensic evidence, the Kalispell Police Department released an official statement. It confirmed what many had feared. After collecting evidence throughout the day and interviewing numerous people, it appears Nicholas Olsen Hartley took the lives of his young family before calling 911. After making the phone call to dispatch, he took his own life. The words were simple, direct, and devastating. The department didn't just stop at confirming the crime. They also acknowledged the weight it left behind, not just for the family, but for the first responders and investigators who walked into that house and saw what no one should ever have to see.
The Kalispell Police Department reports there's no risk to the public at this time. An investigation is currently underway and a police presence has been in the area all day.
The Kalispell Police Department made it clear that this tragedy extended far beyond one household. It wasn't just a horrific scene. It was a weight carried by every officer who stepped inside that home. Internally, the department began offering resources to help their own officers process what they had witnessed. Because even for seasoned professionals, scenes like this one don't fade easily. Officials also expressed their support and sympathy for the surviving family members left behind, those now navigating a future defined by unimaginable loss. It was, by every measure, a senseless act, and for the city of Kalispell, one that would leave scars for a long time to come. In the days after the tragedy, grief rippled through the Flathead Valley like a shockwave. A town where everyone knows each other, now bound by a tragedy no one could have seen coming. To help the survivors, those left to pick up the shattered pieces, a GoFundMe was launched by loved ones of Katie Olsen Hartley. Our family suffered the unimaginable on the morning of 11 May 2025, the fundraiser read. Katie, Heidi, and Stellan were taken from us in the most horrific way imaginable. The goal wasn't just about covering funeral costs. It was about easing the weight on the shoulders of Katie's parents, Dave and Denise, and her sister Kayla, along with Kayla's partner, Joshua. People who had suddenly gone from family dinners and shared laughter to trying to make sense of coffins and court documents. I know this valley has a huge heart and will step up, the message continued. And it did. Donations poured in. Messages of love, outrage, confusion. Complete strangers left words that sounded like prayers, because that's what people do when nothing makes sense. They hold each other tighter, even from a distance. But for Katie's family, no amount of support could fill the space left behind. Not in the nursery, not at the dinner table, not in the silence that now lives where laughter used to be. In the face of an unthinkable loss, Katie's family did what few can. They spoke. Her sister Kayla released a message on behalf of the grieving family. Her voice was steady, but the weight behind her words was unmistakable. On behalf of my family, we wanted to extend our deepest thanks to our family, friends, loved ones, and this community, she said. We feel your love and support, and we can't get through this without each and every one of you. It wasn't just gratitude, it was survival. A lifeline thrown into the dark. Because while the headlines would eventually move on, the Olsen Hartley family would not. Their lives had been split in two, before the call and after. And while investigators worked to trace the steps leading up to that Sunday morning, those left behind were just trying to breathe through the hours, carry memories that now cut like glass, and hold space for two children and a young mother who should still be here. Nicholas's motives remain unclear. There was no history of domestic violence on record, no restraining orders, no past arrests, nothing on paper to predict what he would do next. But the police weren't the only ones asking hard questions. So was the community. So were mental health professionals across the state. To some, Nicholas Olsen Hartley was a father, a husband, a man living a quiet life in a quiet town. But to mental health professionals, his final actions point to something far deeper and far more dangerous. A growing, unspoken crisis among men. Across the country, men are struggling, and they're struggling in silence.